Good morning, Yvonne. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to me.
Good evening, wherever you are.
I know we've only got 1.5 days before the end. This year has completed. I don't think anyone will be sorry to see this one go.
I think that a lot of people have high hopes for a different outcome in the coming year than what we've experienced thus far.
Mm-hmm.
And not that it's our topic of the day, but in my perception, we only really just got started. So,
Yes. So, what a topic, hey?
worship, reverence, and relationship. It's something that we talked about before in order to put ourselves again a little bit on the edge of our own explorations. uh, you and I both have quite some experience, not necessarily in the most positive of senses, being brought up with a world around us that is into worship. You have a very beautiful take on it, and in the description this is also articulated very nicely. So I'm going to give it to you to open us up around this word worship and how it is so much different to a state of reverence that we could be having.
Well, yes. I've never been very good at that thing of worship because to me, I feel words like we feel words. And so worship has always been something that um, has put something above you. And what happens if something is put above you, then instantly it diminishes your own relationship with yourself. So with all due respect to the religious factors that we have all been, under, it doesn't matter what country you're in or whether you have a religious alignment or whether there is religion in your family, it doesn't matter. The culture itself expresses that. And it's always about putting something above you, and you need to worship it. And I, right from a very early age, I used to think to myself, why, if you are God, would you need me to get down on my knees? What would you need from me? You're God, for God's sake. So I think that was probably a little bit of the Dutch in me, we're a bit strong-minded. And so it never sat with me very well to have this idea of putting myself beneath someone. And then, of course, we've been indoctrinated, particularly since the advent of television and magazines, and that we've got this celebrity status where everybody is looking up to someone to attempt to be like them, to be approved of. Well, first of all, to prove of themselves, and to somehow find some way of loving self by being more like someone else. And we're not meant to be like someone else. We are uniquely configured for a reason, and it makes us absolutely magnificent when we finally come home to that understanding that we are all individuated expressions of the prime creator. And there is no up there and down there, except maybe in the old English sitcoms, right? And to me, it is so much the core of what humanity has been suffering from for eons. And that is this feeling of not good enough. If there is printed within you that there is something for you to worship, to put above you, then there has to be something not right with you. That is how our mindset then works. And so we're constantly looking for approval, for recognition, for some way of feeling as good as. And what that does, it takes us away from who we truly are. It takes us away from our own beauty, our own significance, and our own value. So for me, worship is something that creates a servitude, as the thesaurus says, a servility, getting on your knees. And we are moving into a new earth of sovereignty. And so it's a complete contradictory term to becoming sovereign, self governing, self reliant, self respondable, and most of all, self accepting and self loving. No worship there. And reverence, well, of course, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I'd like to know, Sovereign, how you look at worship, because I know you like to pull the word apart in a different way. So, what does that
Yeah, Yvonne, I brought it up last week, and it was just an interesting kind of, oh, that would be a word sound too, because you and I share this affinity and this intrigue for language and how it has been used and how we were brought up with it, to use it just for whatever the culture around us has assigned meaning to the word. And I've learned over time to really question everything, to really go through and pull apart this kind of syntax, this the language that we use very much unconsciously and unknowingly, not being fully aware what the intrinsic meaning or what the value of such a word sound is. And for me, I get images with language. And so that's one of my beautiful gifts, is that when people speak, I just see pictures. And sometimes these pictures are very uninspiring, and sometimes they're almost like that sound doesn't create a picture in my mind that makes any sense. I can't relate with it. I can't feel it. And worship is one of those sounds. The same for relationship. And to me, the picture that relationship or worship creates is really a picture of a ship, of a boat. And so this brings us then into when English language got reformatted for the purpose of empire expansion. And a lot of the more Gaelic and ancient language syntax and all the variations thereof got kind of homogenized into a reduced but also kind of stripped of its intrinsic meaning, because the root of ship is actually shape. So if you look that up in the etymology, you'll find that relationship isn't actually a ship based on a relation. It is actually a shape that is part of that relation. And all of a sudden, for me, in the imagery that I receive around a relationship or being in a relationship, is that it has its own unique form. The picture of a boat is one of those clipper ships, and I look at it from the top, so it's always an ellipse form kind of boat. And a shape allows much more individuation as to what this relation shape that I have in a constellation with a specific person has. Now, worship in that sense, for me, the feeling that I get with it is that I'm putting myself under something. Now, that could be seen healthy for a very self inflated ego. And I have gone onto my knees several times during my lifetime because I got very self indulged with my own journey. And for me, the purpose of kind of archetypally bowing, so to speak, to a higher power, it's really allowed me to find that I was actually protecting myself from an outside world much more than I was trying to be, far away from God or the prime creator in that sense. And so I've used a sense of a process of acknowledging, and it's more the sense of the reverence of this source code that is to me a higher power outside of myself, that I was able to come into reverence for. And then after that, I quickly become invited to, come and join the next church sermon meeting. And as part of it, as it was through all of my upbringing, there was worship. And, you stand there and people all put their arms in the air. And it is really that sense of something outside of ourselves. But when I look at the teachings of Jesus, or what there is currently in the mainstream available, is that the kingdom of heavens is within. And so when I go into more of the Gnostic teachings and the spiritual ways of relating that so many other cultures have, they are very aware that it's the inner relationship, not something that is outer. And we seem to have been, how I like to call it, or at least how I see it, been brought down in this organized religious fashion, which has really just been part of the empire expanding, and the powers that are underwriting that, benefiting from that, is that there is a flawed implicit in needing to seek forgiveness outside of myself, needing to seek acknowledgement outside of myself. And in human ecology, it is very natural for children to seek acknowledgement from the grown-ups around them. But when we then are being shared that there is a guy or a man with a beard in the sky that watches everything that you do, and that in order for you to be in his good eye, you have to be a good boy. There is implicit in that there's something flawed, while I was made in the image of that as well. And so for me, I was brought into that world right from birth. So it wasn't until I was 14, 15 that I really started radically questioning so much of it, that over time I became aware that I need to find my inner relationship to the divine. And that became much more of a journey of exploring what is the actual feeling. This worshiping outside of myself that I was programmed with didn't give me a feeling, but it gave me a sense of, I need to somehow find appraisal. And if I do that good enough, then a feeling may fill me, if God is willing, that I am indeed in his good favor. And to me, that is part of a program that is very dysfunctional. And in relationship to sovereignty, it is very much incoherent with a being made in his image. And what it takes us out of is actually to sit in the place of reverence, of being one with God, being one with creation, and deepening that space of a feeling based experiential place to really embody and to really be with. And so for me, when we decided to choose this word worship, I was like, oh wow, this is going to be interesting, because perhaps there's still some unresolved patterning in me around the upbringing that I received. And to me, it's been very much a long journey to find how I can be in a relationship with my divine creator source, and not see myself as less of as that, but also not see myself as this sovereign human being that doesn't therefore need God. And there's a huge misconception around sovereignty that the word itself can trigger a lot of human beings. And a little bit later, I'll go into that, because how I've come to learn what sovereignty really is so different from what it seems to be portrayed as.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. All of that and then some. You know, when we're talking about worship and the religious influences that have been in both our lives and in everyone's life, really, what always gets to me is the incongruencies of statements that are thrown out by those who have placed themselves between the divine and the human being, whether they be, you know, whatever role that they choose. And one of the ones that always got to me was what you just mentioned: we are made in the image of God. And the next sentence, and we're all created sinners. And I'm going, so God's a sinner? No, we didn't say it. Yeah, you just did that. You know, it doesn't make any sense. And so much of what we are programmed with doesn't make any sense. And it takes us away. It's a distraction away from us, our authentic inner knowing. And for me, as I say, I feel words. So when someone tells me I need to worship something, there is something in me that just, it's like a, you know, it's a rebellion in my cells, not in my head, but in my heart. It's like, no. But when I come to the place of having a relationship like that, actually, with the divine, with that power. Now, you talk about it being a higher power outside of us. Well, there is no higher power outside of us. There is a higher power inside of us that is constantly calling us home, constantly asking us to remember who we are. And that is the journey, of course, that we're all on today, is to have that memory come to the surface, and to wash away all the programming of having someone lord over us and looking up to someone else as being more than. And where nobody is more than another. We are different. I love the phrase in French, vive la différence. You know, let's celebrate the difference. And that is what makes us all so unique and magnificent. But it's also the reason that we exist in the first place, where this intelligence, whatever you want to call it, and please, you know, the man with the beard, that's Father Christmas, this quantum intelligence that is the life force of what we call reality and whatever we live in. That life force has created these sparks of individuated energetic expression in all sorts of form, not just in human form, in flowers, in the bees, in the cats and dogs and the horses. It is amazing when you look around you and you see how all this energy has been able to create itself into different form for the purpose of experiencing itself. And when we can get out of our silly heads and see that as that is what nature is and that is what nature expresses, then we can learn to have reverence. And that means honoring all of it. For me, reverence is having a deep honor for life. It is a feeling, as you say, as where worship is a mental state. But reverence is something that comes from the heart, from the soul, where you can place your hands together and you can bow your head, not in worship, but in acknowledgement and relationship to another expression of Source that is doing the best it can under the circumstances it finds itself in. But we have been so taken away, so far taken away from that knowledge and that memory. I wrote this morning that we have been caught up in this pure maintenance of life rather than the intention of life and the beauty of life and the purpose of life. And so when you just said, let's talk about worship, I had to laugh because I could see my father's face. Now, I think I've mentioned before, I had a very stern Dutch father and who came from what you might call blue blood, right? So he would walk like this. I used to always think of him as a man without arms because he always had his arms behind him and he would walk like this. I think underneath it there was probably, a little boy in there that was just desperate not to be seen. But however, so I always, the word worship, my father, you had to be kidding. That just wasn't something that would even relate. So it never really resonated with me in the first place because even though he might have had a lot of false pride, he did instill pride, being proud of who you are and being the best of yourself. And if that's what you can be, then there's no worshiping necessary. There is no need to get on our knees for anyone. It was interesting because when I went on my journey, 30 years ago, and you go on these explorations as you've done and we've all done, where you go and look for teachers or you look for some sort of wisdom. And I went down the track of some Eastern philosophies, and I'd go to these things and there'd be somebody sitting on a cushion above looking down upon people, and sometimes they would have a feather duster and they would be blessing you with it. And I would look up and I'd go, I'm sorry. And then they'd go, well, if to get to nirvana, you have to come through me. It's like Christians saying to get to heaven, you need to go through Jesus Christ. Well, that's a hell of a messy journey, I reckon. I don't want to go through anybody. That would be really not very nice. So it doesn't resonate with me. So much is given to us that we just have in our head, but we don't take down to the heart mind, where we don't feel whether it resonates with us. Is this truth for us? Is this in alignment with who we are as a significant, beautiful expression of this life force that is in everything? Then worship becomes irrelevant, but reverence becomes essential. Reverence for everything for life, for the gifts that we're given, for the challenges, for the contrasts, for the opportunities, for each other, and mostly for ourselves.
So beautiful, Yvonne. Yay. Yeah. Yeah. Reverence for me is a feeling. And having explored feeling based relating as a way to really kind of access within myself, relating to my own feelings, therefore being able to relate to myself, my direct experience, not so much through concepts, but being willing to sit in the feeling. I have found that in my own journey, in my return to what I call self-sovereignty, which is just the recognition that we are all equal. And I use the sound for my cells as a constant reminder that if I put someone else above me or if I belittle somebody, my sovereignty in that very moment is relinquished. And the reason for that is that if I mistreat or am navigating in an unnatural frequency towards another, what How is that sovereign? That's just me putting myself over the top of somebody or putting somebody under me. And the same goes for me putting myself under somebody else. And so this has been a very stern reminder for me, but also a very loving one, because sovereignty is not this emasculated strength that has come about on a mental plane that knows that I'm sovereign. And I therefore have to see all living life, and particularly humans in my human ecology, as entirely equal to me, not as a special thing, but that is simply natural. And so for me, this return to my own sovereignty has been a return to remembering intrinsic and innate awarenesses that are simply part of our human nature. They're simply part of who we are as a human family, outside of all the programs and all the languaging and all the outsourced ways of navigating that I used to operate on. And that has taken a lot of training, and that has taken a lot of humility, because having been brought up into a broken world with siblings and a culture that all didn't really question really anything much, because it wasn't part of the succession in human ecology, at least in the part of the world where I was growing up in the Netherlands, to be a radical inquirer into the truth of everything and feeling into our own truth as to whether that is really part of an innate awareness. That is something that I much later in life had to return to. And it's not something that I ever lost. It's just refinding it again and re-entering that inner awareness. That is a place of love, and it is a place of compassion. But I must say that it's a dense journey to get there, because in order to become sovereign, which is what we already all are, we are on a journey to remembering innate and intrinsic knowings of what it means to navigate in a natural frequency, what it means to be in a relationship with life and all life around us, where we no longer have to defend or protect ourselves or tell ourselves story that, I'm better than that person, and I'm more special than that person. And depending on where we each grew up on this earth, we've all been, there's a saying in Dutch, we got a hit of the windmill. It's called a klap van de molen. And we all certainly did. And my own mother very eloquently puts it that, yeah, we all come here and we get our backpack filled up. And later in life, we have to work out how to get those heavy boulders that we thought that we somehow have to carry around, how to place them again away from ourselves, and that they are not our ability to continue carrying along, because all those boulders are just programs of shame and guilt and stories of not good enough and stories of I didn't do it right. And for me, this journey back into sovereignty, for me, has been really a journey back into love. And the hardest part in it, but the most intricate part of it, has been to cultivate self-love, love for self, love for my resistances, love for my objections, love for my not agreeance, love for my, I don't know if that's really my truth. And really rediscovering, so what is my truth then? For the longest while, I really was able to identify everything that was not truth by saying, I don't want that, and that is not this, and that is not that. And I was measuring it to my new set of insights. And I really have had a long and dense journey to really come into the place. So what do you want then? And how do you want to experience this, so that I can become the arbiter of my own experience and can become so much more effective in the relationships that I have, and changing that word ship for me into shape, in relationship to the divine. The picture that emanates from me is a beautiful eight. It's that beautiful infinity symbol of flow and currency that has the ability to shape and move itself. And for me, where we started out, language has so much to do with how we see the world. And in order for me to see the world with eyes unclouded, I really have found great resource in tapping into what does this word really stand for, and using it in terms of worship as a way to relate with life outside of myself. Is that really me being in my own sovereign expression of the divine? And I find it a very humbling journey. And so for me, in relationship to sovereignty, it is really uh, a place of relating to the world around me and other humans out of a place of reverence. And that is real training, because it's so easy to react, and it's so easy to give off, and it's so easy to still act out of a need to be a little bit more significant than somebody else, therefore feeling better about myself. These are all very dysfunctional programs that all come from our formative years, that once we see that that's what we're doing because we want to be sovereign, and therefore we measure our ways of expressing and being with others to, is this natural or is this not natural, we can come into a relationship with ourself and with the other that is from a place of love and a place of acceptance. And that to me involves that sense of reverence. And I do sense that I have greater levels of reverence for things that I currently still deem more sacred than other things. But I have also found that I have cultivated and returned to this innate and original innocence of awe when a dragonfly comes sit on my table, and I'm instantly in that space of reverence. Or when a little butterfly sits on my foot, it's when I know that life is connecting with me, and I feel in myself through that experience like, wow, this is such a magical place to be. Welcome to Earth. Welcome to being an expression of the divine, and being able to see the divine outside of myself in pretty much everything that's going on. And that's a big one to grapple sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely true. So many things as you're talking come up for me. But the biggest one that just really come forward is the, I was look at who created the word. I was go, somebody creates words, because I remember when I was a child in Indonesia, was the beginning of the creation of Bahasa Indonesia. Okay. And every day at school, we would get a new word sent to us that was being made by somebody. And now that is a language, right? But when I was a child, it wasn't. So who makes up the words, and what's the intention behind the word? And I often look at the word worthy. And I think, well, whoever made up that word worthy had an intention of you not feeling worthy. It's a controlling kind of word. And the same thing with worship. Worship is a word that puts you in a place where someone has rules that you need to measure up to. So, as you were talking, I got this real sound of we've got to measure up. We've got to measure up. When you look at how our education system is put in place, we have to measure up. When we go out, when we go to our religious places, we have to measure up. Well, who sets the rules? So, that has created in humanity is that we're constantly striving to be accepted, striving to be as good as the next guy. And that has created conflict, competition, comparison, all the things that have separated us not just from each other, but from life, from ourselves. And this is when you talk about sovereignty, and because when you look at the word sovereign has to do with the way we look at it is kingdom, right? It's royalty. And again, that puts it up here, but it's not sovereignty from where I'm coming from, and what I have learned in my world and in my own experience. When we become truly sovereign, that is in relationship, in an equal, co-creative, cooperative relationship with the divine that lives within, it is the softest, most beautiful, peaceful, compassionate, benevolent, ancient, wise energy. And once upon a time, I used to feel this energy within me that was wanting to burst out. And I was so scared of it because I used to think, well, because I was a fairly controlling young woman and could be quite officious rather than, and efficient, but in an officious way. And so for me, I thought, wow, I blow people out of the water now. If I let this out, that is going to be explosive. And what I found as I found my way home to my own inner life, my own inner connection and relationship with that which has created me, I found that it was the opposite, that it was an inner power that was so gentle, but incredibly powerful and incredibly strong. And so when you talk about sovereignty, then that is definitely where we've got to go. It is coming home to our own divinity without having the need to worship or look at anything outside of ourselves as being more than we are. And we don't have to measure up to anyone except this. This is where it stops. The buck always stops with me. And when I put my head on a pillow at night, if I have not lived up to that, and when I say lived up to that, it is more lived into that, then I have a sleepless night. So my intention every day is to have reverence. And with reverence goes an incredible amount of gratitude and appreciation. I am forever in a state of awe and gratitude and amazement at how life is able to express itself in front of me and within me. That sense of, that's the reverence that I feel every day for me, for where I've come from, for where I'm going, for you, for humanity, for life, for, nature. It is all out there showing us the beauty and the equality. Yeah, I don't see a bee out there saying, I'm a better bee than you are. Well, they might. I haven't quite got to bee language. But, it is so bizarre when you think about what we put ourselves through. When we look at these magazines, and hey, I've had times when I want to be completely brainless and get a magazine, but it's all about these celebrities, and I have to dress like this one and that one, or I have to be slim like that one, or I have to get my skin looking like this one. Why? Because we are purely created according to our own divine plan for the purpose of our own self-expression. And that is what sovereignty is about, is coming home to remember that, to honor that and to have reverence for that, not as something better than another, bigger than another, more than another, but as someone significant in this whole journey of life as we move into the next experience of that.
Yay. Yeah, worthiness that you touched upon is actually the root word of worship. It's actually worth-ship, but actually that's worth shape. And so we're talking about a shape of worthiness. And it's almost like we somehow in that word alone, we are not at the defining capacity to be in worthiness, because it creates this division and it creates this separation simply by the use of the word. And it's just so interesting to me how unconsciously words like this are used, and they are implying certain behavioral activity. But one of the key elements as we're pulling this apart for me is that if I can feel a word, then it's a living experience. If I have to do something in the process of experiencing a word, then it's not necessarily a feeling, but it's more of a concept. It's an action that I, maybe I have to put my hands together, or maybe I have to put my hands in the air, or maybe I have to get on my knees. So there's some action involved that is sort of sitting inside of this word sound. And that makes sounds like this, in terms of worship, a noun, and it makes it still. And for me, one can have reverence, but it's not something that you can have other than you can feel it. It's a state of being. And I find in my own exploration of synthropy and really rediscovering the synthropic nature of life, but also the synthropic nature of our human ecology, that so much has gone astray, so to speak, over time, because we have stopped using words that are verb based and are orientating ourselves more around nouns that are concepts and constructs of ideas, or a noun is a construct of ideas contained within the word. So the word itself has a whole bunch of meanings that are all intellectual, but they're not a sense felt experience. And this is where I really like our conversations, because we really get to kind of lean into, oh, I'm feeling really complete with whenever that word comes up in the future. I have a great sense of relating to it for what it is and what it isn't, and how there is language that is more clearly articulating the full reality of my own experience, and the full reality that I get to experience through the state of being in reverence is so much richer, and it's so much more in connection, and I'm so much more in relation with what I am experiencing reverence towards. But it's an inner experience. And one of the beautiful things that you shared around, and what came up for me, was that in relationship to the patterns of nature, is that I, in one of my pseudo books, because I haven't really published it, it's titled Synthropy and the Hidden Hand of God, is that this hidden energy that is not necessarily self-evident because of the lens that I'm wearing. I'm currently looking at some banana trees and a coconut tree kind of waving in the wind. And my mind goes, yeah, banana tree, coconut tree. And there's, beautiful shimmering of their leaves going on. There's a life force that pulses within that. There is a spirited nature in every unique expression of individuated life and individuated expression of the source of all creation. It's that For me, that is what I call synthropy. It's the energetic self-sentience that lives throughout all living things that I get to observe and I get to relate with. And through the study of synthropy, I'm so much more in awe and so much more in curiosity and so much more in openness to receiving what that life form in and of itself is doing, what that life form in and of itself is bringing about and contributing to life here on the earth. And those contributions, those patterns in nature that you spoke about, they are so rich and they are so amazing. And it's when I get to comprehend outside of like, oh yeah, that is a banana tree, I get to lean into what it is doing in and of itself. I get to be in so much more of a relationship within myself. And the beauty of that is, and why I'm bringing it up, is that I have, for the longest time, and it's still very much part of my kind of predominant way of viewing the world, particularly when I'm driving a motorbike. I'm not very much in deep relating with the world around me because I'm driving, 70 kilometers an hour. But when I'm in a place of stillness and a place of observation, I have a refound and a newfound ability that was always there to find answers to questions and curiosities that I'm only able to access by being in reverence, by being in openness. I've been brought up in a world where I've been pretty much brought down that this is how the world works. This is what this is, and this is what this is, and this is how this, and this is good, and this is bad, and this is right, and this is wrong, and you don't do this, and you do that. And all of those conditionings have really programmed my kind of conscious mind into a whole range of belief systems that, quite frankly, have been entropic, flawed, fear and scarcity based, and have led me to feel disempowered and needing power outside of myself to bestow some sort of grace upon me so that I can still feel good about myself. And what I've found is that through my journey also in the Gnostic teachings and the more essential teachings that Yeshua ben Joseph has shared, I have been able to see that they were speaking all about the same stuff that pretty much everybody that has reached some state of inner enlightenment, inner return, has brought to the world. And it's about being in a more intimate relating with life around us, and that all of life around us is performing a function with purpose. And for me as an individual observer, it's then for me to be humble enough to question what that function may be. And in all of that returning, as I like to call it, I've come to that place where I'm so much more feeling from a metaphysical place my ability to interrelate, but intercommunicate with the relationship that I have with plant life, even where I'm no longer just a consumer of goods and resources and fruits and plants, and but that I'm having a metaphysical ability that is accessible within purely by being open and being curious and being in a willful openness to relate and be in a relationship with that which I am observing. This world, this planet, this earth, it is such a magnificent um, place to be on. And I would just like to come back to that beginning with you, Yvonne, where we started out of in this place of being in relationship with the divine, and that is the place where we can come home deeper to inner truths. But really this place that you spoke to, this place of peacefulness, which for me is the place of sovereignty. It's being at peace and being in ease with the world around us, as opposed to being in reaction. And I was just hoping you would take us a little bit deeper into your own experience of that, how you cultivate that, how you remind yourself, if that is even still necessary. I still have to remind this thing, like, hey, are you feeling right now, or are you just like in your little whirlwind of thoughts trying to intellectualize stuff? So yeah, I'd like to invite you to share a bit more around that inner relationship to the divine, of which I am also a part.
Yes, absolutely wonderful, because that's exactly where I was wanting to go. So we come back to the word worship, that the relationship that the word creates within us is that we have to relate to something outside of ourselves. This is how we have been programmed to look at. And for us to come home to our sovereignty, and what's occurred for me, and it's taken some serious dedication, some serious determination and discipline, not things that humans are used to putting, as a priority, to take myself from that kind of programming to the place where I have been able to own the fact that I am an expression of the divine, or whatever word you want to call this life force. Um, and so the relationship, when you talk about worship, is an external action, as you say, it puts it out of you. The relationship that you create with the inner, where this life force lives, is purely a feeling. It goes into every cell of your body. And and how I've come to that is with this reverence for life. I remember when I first went on this journey, I used to say, they'd say, well, so why are you doing this? What are you doing it for? And goes, because I actually want to live life. And they go, well, that's what you're doing. And I'm going, no, I just feel like I'm going through the motions of what other people say my life is meant to be, or what it's meant to look like. But it doesn't feel like it is the life that I was created for, or that I created myself for. And of course, we've changed language so much in my days, we didn't speak any of the words that we're speaking now. So I really have come to the place where I no longer see the avatar, as I call it, the personality, as number one. I see my soul. So I'm a soul in human form, and I now can truly and honestly say that, because that's how the lens that I see life through, and I see other people from a soul perspective. So I resonate to their energetic frequency, which is the true, the true vibration that we operate at any time, and that tells me how close to being aligned with their particular soul signature they are, or how far away from that is. And it's the more sensitive we become, the more that becomes obvious. And it really isn't that difficult. It's a simple decision. Now, I say simple, but not necessarily easy, because we've got such deep programming. But when you make that decision and you make that contract with your soul, that you want to come home, that you want to come back to remembering and expressing yourself in your full, the creator self, divine, whatever word you want to put to that life force that is within us, that gives us life in this form. When we make that the most important part, when we learn to see the personality as not necessarily secondary, but certainly not the egoic thing that it has been programmed into, but the beautiful expression, the opportunity. And when the soul and the persona become one, that's when we know true sovereignty. That's when we have that incredible inner peace, because once the persona becomes one with soul, there is no fear, there is no division, there is no better than or less than. There is just pure unity. And, we've got this lovely saying, you just have to be there. Well, it's a bit like that, right? But we all have moments of it. I remember I would have glimpses of those moments of bliss. I'm sure you've got them. You find it when you're out. We mostly find it when we're out in nature, because nature is so forgiving. When I talk about nature, I'm talking about the flora and fauna of nature, because we are nature, of course. And when we're in that place, because that is so forgiving, it doesn't matter who you are or what you look like, it's just there for you. So we don't have to prove anything, we don't have to measure up to anything. We can actually just sit there in the middle of this beauty that surrounds us, and we can let go. That is when we can get closest to that sense of bliss and that sense of unity and oneness with nature that we are meant to be. And so the more we practice that, this is what really meditation is asking us to do. And I don't meditate anymore, because I really live in that state most of the time, where I am not really engaging with the chaos of the world so much. But when you learn to just have stillness, I prefer stillness, because meditation again can become a mental construct. How do I meditate? What do I do? You've got to count. I used to have to count down from 20 and get halfway and forget, because my mind would be somewhere else, and then I'd have to do it again. And it's still a mental construct. But in the beginning, that is a good way to go, because we're so trained in that respect. But stillness, you talk about it a lot. There is nothing more pure and more connected than to sit in total stillness and listen to the stillness. Because when you listen to stillness, there are no thoughts. But when you listen for something, you get distracted. So I just love that place where I just in this vacuum of stillness, which is actually quite palpable. So soul first, that relationship with your inner divine, making soul first, and bringing the persona to blend with that, to meld with that. Then you feel that incredible sense of inner peace, that sense of safety, which we've been trained to feel unsafe and insecure. This feeling of, for me, I always feel like I have this incredible benevolent energy surrounding me. It's like wings, it just feels, and when I get distracted, as we all do, because I'm still human, still, needing to go to the shopping center, heaven help me. And when you get distracted, for me, there is it's like an abrasion almost. And I go, oh no, got to come back to my stillness and my inner self. And there is no need to worship. It is having this amazing relationship with the God, Goddess, all there is. And it's a relationship of equality. And what I really feel is that this energy around me has as much reverence for me in my human form as I have for it. So there is no higher than, lower than. There is just this incredible, compassionate, loving, open, heart-connected experience. And that to me is what sovereignty feels like. And that is something that we can give to ourselves. And once we've got it, then we can give it to each other by seeing the other in their same sovereign space as a pure, beautiful expression of life, doing whatever.
Wow, Yvonne, thank you for these beautiful insights and you sharing from your experience and your awareness that you've returned to. And it's the great journey for all humans. It's definitely available to all of us because it is our home frequency, it is our original nature. And I'm always just so surprised how these conversations between you and I are so relevant to my own navigation. And again, finding myself being reminded uh, of how I benefit really relating to some of the humans in my own life that are so precious to me, but I've not been in that space within myself with. And looking very much forward to rectify that and to return really back to what is only natural. And I just want to thank you for sharing your beautiful wisdom. And we will do this again. I have a very good feeling about this.
I have a really good feeling about it too. And, you know, this is another thing that I would like to perhaps end with. Not with, you know, we're not ending, but it's that this magical life that brings us together at the right time for the purpose of expansion and for the purpose of love. And that is how I feel about our relationship. And
So
I'm
good.
forever in reverence of that with gratitude.
So beautiful, Yvonne. If you enjoyed part or the whole of this sharing, please share it out. There's probably a whole bunch of people that really would like to receive this. And even if they only take a snippet, to make it available to others. Thank you for sharing this on your social media into the groups where you're an active part. And come see more of what it is that we're all talking about every week on Earth Heroes TV, a beautiful place where all of this is compiled in Yvonne's Ascension Wisdom channel. So much love from me here in Bali. Yvonne, thank you again. So
And
nice to
from
be
me in Melbourne.
yeah,
Bye bye.
for now.